Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to all you PMOs, PMEs, POMOs, POMEs, and PIMQs. Welcome to The World, the podcast where we discuss all things related to the process of waking up, walking out, and moving on from life as a Jehovah's Witness. I'm Dr. Ryan Lee, and today we're going to talk a little bit about the challenges of being an empath. I chose this topic because I've noticed that I encounter empaths quite a bit in the work I do with XJWs, and I'll get into that in a little while about why that is. But first off, let's just establish what we're talking about here. So what do we mean by an empath? Generally speaking, empaths are people that not only feel deeply, but are very attuned to the emotional energy of others and have a tendency to absorb that energy, to feel with them. Being an empath can be a beautiful superpower when managed properly, and it's not uncommon for people with this ability to become counselors and therapists, or simply just be the kind of person that friends feel safe confiding in. But being an empath comes with some problems if it's not managed properly. One of the more common challenges I hear from clients who fall into the empath category is that they find being around other people to be extremely overwhelming, because they feel the feelings of everyone in the room. Sometimes it's overwhelming simply because there are just so many different energies in the room. And even when those energies are generally positive, it can still feel disorienting. But it's so much more difficult when the energies in the room are anxious or fearful or angry or tense or sad. The empath is flooded with the feelings of others, and in some cases can feel those feelings even more intensely than the person they're absorbing it from. This often happens when the other person that they're feeling is suppressing and therefore unconscious of what they're really feeling. They may be operating on one level, but the empath senses there's something underneath that's going on that may be a little bit more dark or heavy. Anyways, the end result is that social encounters in general feel exhausting, and empaths often have to deal with an energetic hangover and recovery period after socializing. The other thing I hear from empaths a lot is that people tend to flock to them with their problems. No matter where they go, they just find themselves in these situations where someone is telling them their deepest, darkest trauma and every horrible thing that's happened in their life or how much they're struggling, and holding space, trying to compassionately help this person out of this mess. When they enter a social situation, they often find that they're always drawn to the person in the room who's struggling. Now, that can be the case, but a lot of the times people report that they don't think they're seeking people out, but somehow they just end up in these situations. Like they're putting out some kind of homing beacon for the damaged. And well, they pretty much are. In most cases, there's reasons why they exude an energy that draws in this type of person. And I'm going to elaborate a little bit on this. So I may have mentioned this before, but prior to focusing exclusively on working with XJWs, I encountered instances of narcissism in parents or families of clients maybe about 20% of the time. But since I've been working with XJWs, that number is about 80 to 85%. I don't know why I'm laughing. It's just ridiculously high. It's clearly a thing, and I'll cover that in a completely different episode, why there are so many narcissists among JWs. Now, it's also worth mentioning that I found probably at least 60 to 70% of the clients I work with could be considered empaths. And I don't believe the high numbers in both of these categories is a coincidence. The experience of growing up with a narcissist tends to produce empaths. And the reason for that is that someone who is emotionally unpredictable or volatile and demands to be the center of the universe tends to have an effect on family members around them that creates people who are overly preoccupied with the emotional state of others. But empath personalities don't necessarily have to be the byproduct of being raised with or by a narcissist. It can occur in any situation where there's emotional volatility or abuse in the home. And sometimes it's not even about abuse exactly, but rather the feeling of being bowled over by the intensity of feeling from someone who is unable to manage their own emotions in a healthy way. In other words, someone who might sob uncontrollably for a full day because they stubbed their toe on the table or whatever, puts out a lot of intense energy. And that kind of intense energy is hard to just ignore. As social creatures, we're always absorbing and putting out different types of energy that we're sharing with each other. And intense energies are contagious. So even if the intense energy isn't explicitly directed at you, it has an effect on the way that your day is going to go and how you're going to feel. And it can be really overwhelming. So in summary, anytime a child is raised in an environment where intense emotional or physical pain occurs frequently and unpredictably, that child becomes super adept at hyper-attuning to the emotional temperature of others. It's a protection mechanism. Basically, if we can sense that danger is coming, we're able to have some degree of control over avoiding or reducing the danger. So they become hyper-vigilant, hyper-aware, tuning into every little detail, every tone of voice, every turn of phrase, every bit of body language, every bit of emotion that can be read on the face. They become an expert in sensing the signs that danger may be ahead or something unpredictable that will make them feel overwhelmed or uncomfortable. And as the child becomes more adept at recognizing the signs of danger, they often also become adept at engaging in behaviors that pacify or soothes the troubled parent or sibling. Essentially, they become like a little therapist. And this is the genesis of the empath personality, in most cases. It's developing hyper-attunement to scan for danger, and then, in conjunction, developing a series of behaviors that neutralize that threat. The empath archetype, or identity, is further developed by reinforcement and validation that comes from different ways. So, for example, reinforcement comes as a result of successfully nullifying threats, producing the reward of feeling safe. So every time somebody in the family starts to become volatile and this person intervenes, becomes the peacemaker, and successfully is able to calm that person down and avoid the danger that presentation represents, something clicks in them. And they go, okay, we avoided that, we feel safe, we feel good, let's repeat that process again. And then validation comes from other people in our lives who lavish us with praise for being so sensitive and caring and invested in others. What a nice thing to be. You care so much about people, you're just there all the time unfailingly, and you always keep this calm disposition and you're always reaching out to people in trouble. And sure, that's a nice thing. But in this case, they're validating us for a behavior that's really a protection mechanism. I'm sure some of it is about you being a good person, but a lot of it is about a desperate attempt to stay emotionally safe. And then we get more validation from the people we hold space for. And they express gratitude to us that we were there for them when we really needed them. And then they reward us with their presence every time they have more problems that they need to unload. And this in itself creates an approximation of the feeling of friendship. I'm sure for a lot of you out there listening who identify with this empath archetype, I would bet money you have at least one, if not multiple, friends who pretty much understand your relationship as them dumping and you listening. And they call you any time of day or night and always reaching out because they know that you're going to be there. Now, again, that is part of a good friendship, but that should be reciprocal. It should go both ways. And the primary basis of our relationship shouldn't be something that feels similar to a therapist and client relationship. There's one more piece that often plays a role in reinforcing the empath archetype, which is that we know how painful it is to be ignored, left out, unseen, abused. And we have this feeling that we never want to let anyone else feel the pain that we felt, which creates a sense of purpose. We're going to do everything in our power to make sure nobody ever felt as shitty as we felt in situations like that. All of this reinforcement, validation, and sense of purpose creates a sense of identity for us. As far as we're concerned, this is just who we are. We are someone who never turns our back or ignores someone who is hurting. This is how others see us, this is how we see ourselves, and so it is. This becomes your blessing and your curse. And when you enter into a social situation, all of these factors come into play. Whether consciously or not, the first thing you tend to do is scan the room to take an emotional temperature of everybody that's there, feeling out where everybody's at. And then when you identify a potential emotional threat, you engage with the target in an attempt to neutralize it. Now again, consciously we're thinking, oh, they look sad, they look like they're having a rough day, they look like they could use a listening ear. And I need to keep saying it. Yes, sometimes that's good and sometimes that's nice. I'm talking about you people who do it chronically and compulsively. And again, in your mind, you may be thinking, well, that's what I do and I'm a nice person. But very often, what's really operating underneath is you are not able to be at peace and feel safe until you feel sure that everyone else in the room is in a relatively stable emotional place. So, of course, you end up reaching out to that person. You end up engaging in conversation. You draw them out. You ask them more questions. And when all is said and done, you end up missing out on most of the party and leave feeling exhausted. But at least you feel safe and like a good person because you helped someone in need. And yeah, sometimes we're not even seeking it out, but people and all of their problems seem to magically find us. Part of this is related to the reputation you've built up as being an empathetic person who has endless time for listening to the problems of others. But I'll also say, at the risk of sounding a little bit woo, I'll throw out the idea that this may be a little bit about the law of attraction at work. Now, I feel like I need to insert a caveat. I don't swallow everything that's put out there about the law of attraction, but there is something to the idea that similar energy is attracted to similar energy, and that the emotions and thoughts that you carry with you on a regular basis have a way of broadcasting to other people who are drawn to the counterpart of that energy. But yeah, if that sounds too woo to you, let's just keep it at you have a way of carrying yourself and showing up in the world that broadcasts something about you that others intuitively pick up on, however you want to describe it. And all of this is kind of problematic. Of course, it's nice to offer support to someone who needs a kind ear, but only when our cup is full and we have some extra juice to spread the love. But as a default way of operating in the world, propelled by a relentless sense of threat that needs to be pacified, it's not really sustainable. Okay, so what do we do about this? Well, let me start by saying this is absolutely something we can change about ourselves. And I'm saying this as a recovering empath myself. I have always been a heart on my sleeve, bleeding heart type person. And it's no coincidence that I ended up as a therapist. People talk about how I learned to do what I do. And I often say, I was a therapist before I even really understood what a therapist was. I was just kind of like this, and I engaged with all of the wounded, traumatized, I don't like the word damaged, but you know what I mean. People with a lot of problems. I was like a heat-seeking missile. And yeah, for all the reasons I mentioned before, for keeping safe, but also it made me feel good about myself. And I was drawn into this field for similar reasons. But when you do this to the degree that I've been doing it, all day, 5 days a week at least, for years, just holding space and absorbing energy, I hit a point where I almost quit. I didn't think I could be a therapist anymore because I was so full of other people's stuff. I was feeling this in relation to my therapy work, but also at that time I was working with ayahuasca quite a bit. And I remember going in these ceremonies where I would absorb extremely intense energy from the experience of others. These ceremonies are really, I don't know what better word to use than intense. They just bring out very strong, deep emotions. And I remember at times feeling like an energetic trash can, like all of their shit was just being poured into me. And at first, like a lot of you, my first thought was, oh, woe is me. Why am I like this? Why did God make me this way, or whoever, Why am I just an emotional sponge for all of people's dark shit? As if it had nothing to do with me. It's just sort of how I'm wired. And I guess, in a way, yes, it is how I've been wired or programmed. But the mistake was thinking that this was something I had no control over. And what I discovered when I talked more with other people who did even more intense work than I did and seemed to walk away unscathed, what I discovered when I talked to them is the first thing is recognizing that you are allowing this. Whether you think it or not, there is something about the way you're approaching life that you are either, again, broadcasting that you're open for business or you're actively seeking it out and allowing it. And even when you're engaging, the way you're thinking about it, the way this idea that you have to feel everything that they're feeling in order to be helpful is incorrect and is part of what ends up getting overwhelming. So anyways, it takes a little time, but this is absolutely something that you can change. You can harness this power. You can control it and manage it so that you can make more discerning decisions about when you let it in and when you don't. When you take on someone's stuff, if you decide to, and when you decide, nope, that's enough for me right now. I can't take any more and I need to protect myself and I need to be in my own power. Okay, so to close out the show, I'm going to discuss about 5 ideas that may help eliminate or at least reduce the problems that come with being an empath. And all they require is just a little bit of consistency of practice and some patience. So number 1 is remind yourself always that you are safe, especially when you are gearing up to go into a social situation. You are safe. When you were younger, you weren't safe. The emotional needs, demands, and sometimes absolute chaos of the adults in your life were very overwhelming, and you had no choice but to do your best to navigate those experiences, using whatever means possible to stay safe. But you're an adult now. You're all grown up. Nobody has that power over you anymore. You don't have to put up with anyone's shit unless you choose to. You don't have to make space for anyone unless you choose to. You don't have to listen to anyone's problems unless you choose to. You have a lot of different tools at your disposal now. And if all else fails, you can always just walk away from any situation. So again, before entering a social situation, remind yourself that you are safe. Nobody can hurt you unless you allow them. You don't need to scan the room for threats, and you don't need to identify the emotionally wounded. Nobody has the ability to overpower you emotionally unless you allow them. Okay, so number 2 is reminding yourself that you are not responsible for others. You are not responsible for always healing all the pain in the world and trying to remove people's suffering and ease their suffering. You can, if you want to, and that's great, and that's beautiful. Like I said, if your cup is full, great. Spread the love. Make some time. That's fine. But you're not responsible for it. And it's okay some days to say, I don't really have time for this right now. I got my own shit going on. You know, we all carry our own pain, and we're all responsible for saving ourselves. Which, side note, is another important thing. You can't save somebody. You can't save anybody. Take it from a therapist who works all the time with people and working through their problems. Sure, I can support them. I can create a space for helping them navigate and sort through their own challenges. I can offer ideas that maybe they'll take, maybe they'll leave. And yeah, I may have a little bit of extra ability to help when the person, first and foremost, is ready and determined to save themselves and they are asking for help. But even then, what I see over and over again when people start to heal and get healthier is that they are engaging with the process of saving themselves and not turning to me or another therapist to try to solve their problems for them. Anyways, the takeaway for number 2 again is that you are not responsible for others, and you might repeat a little bit of a mantra when you find yourself absorbing the energy of other people, heavy or otherwise. You might say something like, what I am feeling is not mine to concern myself with. Okay, number 3. Dude, take a break from being a therapist, just for a little while. If you're one of these people like I'm talking about, where you're always engaging in these situations and people are unloading, take a conscious, committed break. Commit to not making any emotional space for anyone for at least a month. I don't know if that'll work. I mean, you probably should make some space for your husband or your wife or your kids, but that's it. Just for a month. For a month, no matter who comes to you with whatever problem, no matter how intense, you are off the clock for a month, okay? And if someone does approach you and tries to dump, let them know that you care about them, but now's not a good time for you. This is kind of the same formula we use with a lot of different things when it's challenging and we have to set a boundary, which is we validate what they're experiencing and then we set a clear boundary. I can see you're really going through a rough time and I wish I could be there for you, but unfortunately right now I have a lot on my plate that I'm dealing with. Now, if you decide to ignore that suggestion of taking a month off, at the very least, before you engage in any of these sort of things, if someone says, hey, you mind if I vent a little bit? The first question you should be asking yourself is, do I have enough energy? And that brings us to number 4, which is always keep a steady awareness of your energy gauge. As I mentioned, the goal here is to never give from a place where our cup is depleted. We always want to give from a place of when our cup is overflowing and we have extra to give. So keep a gauge on where you're at with that. And if you're feeling kind of low, I highly suggest don't even start engaging with the conversation. But if you do engage in the conversation, again, keep an eye on your energy gauge. And if it starts to get a little bit low, then end the conversation. In fact, more importantly, not even when your energy gauge is low, but when it's dipping. I used to do this all the time. I'd go, yeah, I'm not going to give more than I have. But what that meant is I would keep going until my gas tank was deep in the red, like just barely, I'm running on fumes. And then I would say, okay, I think I need to take a break. Because in my head, I felt like, okay, now I can justify it. I put in my time, and now that I'm completely depleted, I feel it's fair that I can say I need to walk away. Don't do that. Walk away when your energy starts to dip, and you know that if you walk away at that point, you can recover fairly easily. And you'll still have enough in the tank to deal with all the other things you need to deal with. Your own problems, your own pain. Okay, number 5, I'm just going to throw this one out there. It's the idea of visualizing energetic barriers. It's just an exercise you can do. And again, you don't have to believe fully in the power of harnessing energy and visualizing energy, although I got to say it works for me. But no, it's really more of a mental exercise, and what you can do, one version of creating an energetic barrier is you imagine a shield, a glowing shield all around you that has an aura of maybe, a foot or 2 around you. And imagine that ball of light that surrounds you to be golden and that nothing penetrates that shield unless you allow it. And again, it doesn't really matter if in scientifically provable terms that's actually what's happening, but it's really just a way of communicating to your unconscious that this is what we are doing today, that we are entering in this situation and we're going to be mindful of not absorbing other people's energy, not letting other people's energy in unless we decide we allow it. Now, before we wrap up, I'll just throw in one more. I guess it's number 6, we could call it. Sometimes we are absorbing other people's energy. Sometimes we are amplifying the energy of others through the means that we talked about in this episode. And also, sometimes people are just kind of douchebags. I mean, it's true. And what I'm trying to say here is, sometimes if you find yourself consistently hanging around with a group of people and you feel kind of ick, you feel kind of dark, you feel kind of heavy, and you get the same feeling around this same group of people, it may sound obvious, but please just tune into that. That's basically not really even an empath issue. It's just your internal sense of self is communicating to you that these people are not good for you. I get this a lot sometimes. If my family's listening, I'm going to apologize, but my extended family, there's a lot of dysfunction there. And man, there's a lot of just focus on negativity and things they don't like and things that make them mad or piss them off and outrage over different forms of politics. And it's just, and that's fine in a small dose, but sometimes it's just nonstop. And I just literally feel sick afterwards. And yeah, I do practice the things I'm talking about when I have to be in these situations. But there's this other piece that's just like, it's also okay to just avoid people that make you feel that way. So if that's what's happening for you, please give yourself permission to just keep your distance from people that make you feel physically or energetically ill. All right, so to close out today, I just want to say that to all you empaths out there, this part of you is a beautiful thing. It's a very sweet, nice thing and can bring a lot of kindness into the world. And yeah, when it's done in the proper context, It can alleviate a lot of suffering and help people feel less alone. It really is a superpower. So please don't take away from this episode that this is something that's a problem that you need to fix and change and that you need to be completely shut off and callous and cold. Because no, that's not only is that not good, but most likely that's not really who you are. Some of this is adaptive, protective mechanisms that are on overdrive, for sure. But most likely, there's also a big chunk that's just your heart. It's just the fact that you care about people. So don't lose that part, but protect it. Make sure that if you have a desire to help people, it's not coming at the expense of your own energy. You're no good to anybody else if you're not in good shape yourself. Okay? Okay. All right then. Thank you so much for stopping by. I hope you found it helpful. If you did, please hit the subscribe button and leave us a review. And pay it forward by sharing this podcast with other people who might benefit. If you have any questions, feedback, or ideas for future topics, email me at drryanlee@drryanlee.com or visit my website at drryanlee.com. Until next time, remember, you are brave. You are strong. You are not responsible for other people's problems. And you, my friend, are not alone.
They will see us waiting for such grace.